Meanwhile, as discussed with House leaders, provisions are in place for brief suspensions between the rounds of questioning to allow Mr. Firth a pause if he chooses to avail himself of them. En outre,
furthermore, as with any proceedings of the House, the Chair will decide procedural matters as they may arise. Upon completion of the questioning, the Chair will excuse Mr. Firth from further attendance at the bar, after which he shall withdraw and the House shall resume its usual business for the remainder of the sitting.
Finally, colleagues, I wish to remind members that it is incumbent upon all of us to conduct ourselves in a manner befitting of this occasion and to uphold the dignity of this House. I therefore ask for everyone's cooperation in respecting our rules of decorum.
I now ask the Sergeant-at-Arms to admit Mr. Firth at the bar of the House.
Sergeant-at-Arms to admit Mr. Firth at the bar of the House. Order. À l'ordre. Mr. Kristian Firth, please remain standing until I invite you to be seated. You are attending the bar of the House for being found in contempt, for your refusal to answer certain questions, and for prevaricating in your answers to other questions before the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. You are here today by order of this House for the following purposes. First, to receive an admonishment for your refusal to respond to questions posed to you by the committee. Second, to provide responses to the questions referred to in the committee's 17th report. And third, to respond to supplemental questions. The privileges of the House of Commons are enshrined in the Constitution Act 1867 and the Parliament of Canada Act. This includes the right to institute inquiries and to require the attendance of witnesses. Under the standing orders of this House, they are also exercised by its committees within their respective mandates. These privileges, enjoyed by the House collectively and by members individually, are essential in the discharge of our duties. The House has a power, and indeed the obligation, to reaffirm them when obstruction or interference impedes the House's proceedings and the ability of members to carry out their parliamentary duties. That is precisely what the House has ordered the Speaker, as a guardian of these rights and privileges, to do today. To reprimand you, to reprimand your contempt for refusing to answer questions put to you by the committee and prevaricating other questions. For all these reasons, on behalf of the House of Commons, I admonish you. In addition, the House orders you to respond to the questions you refuse to answer in committee, in whole or in part, and to respond to any supplementary questions. Monsieur Kristian Firth.
Mr. Firth, you have been attending the bar of the House for being found in contempt for your refusal to answer certain questions and for prevaricating in your answers to other questions before the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. You are here today by order of the House for the following purposes. 1. to receive an admonishment for your refusal to respond to questions posed to you by the committee. 2, to provide responses to the questions referred to in the committee's 17th report, and 3, to respond to supplementary questions. The privileges of the House of Commons are enshrined in the Constitution Act 1867 and the Parliament of Canada Act. This includes the right to institute inquiries and to require the attendance of witnesses. Under the standing orders of the House, they are also exercised by its committees within their respective mandates. These privileges enjoyed by the House collectively and by members individually are essential in the discharge of our duties. The House has the power and indeed the obligation to reaffirm them when obstruction or interference impedes the House's proceedings and the ability of members to carry out their parliamentary duties. That is precisely what the House has ordered the Speaker, as the guardian of these rights and privileges, to do today: to reprimand your contempt for refusing to answer questions put to you by the committee and for prevaricating other questions. For all these reasons, on behalf of the House of Commons, I admonish you. In addition, the House orders you to respond to the questions you refuse to answer in committee, in whole or in part, and to respond to any supplementary questions. Mr. Firth.
That you must answer all questions that are posed of you. I would also like to remind you and everyone listening that everything you say as part of these proceedings is protected by parliamentary privilege and cannot be used against you in any other forum. Mr.
Firth, I would like to remind you that you must answer all questions that are posed to you. I would also like to remind you and everyone listening that everything you say as part of these proceedings is protected by parliamentary privilege and cannot be used against you in any other forums.
The Chair is aware that you've been briefed on this process. La présidence sait que le processus.
The Chair is aware that you have been briefed on this process.
You may now be seated. Vous pouvez vous asseoir.
You may now be seated.
The House will now proceed with its questions. La Chambre.
The House will now proceed with its questions.
The House will now proceed to the first round of questions. Each recognized party will have 10 minutes. La Chambre procédera maintenant.
The House will now proceed to the first round of questions. Each recognized party will have 10 minutes.
I wish to remind honourable members again that all questions are to be addressed through the Chair. Avant de commencer,
before we proceed, I wish to remind honourable members that all questions are to be addressed through the Chair.
L'honorable leader du gouvernement.
The Honourable Leader of the Government.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Could Mr. Firth inform the House as to whether he consulted with a medical professional prior to his appearance today regarding answering questions from the House?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I did. I consulted yesterday.
Monsieur l'honorable ministre.
Mr. Speaker, is Mr. Firth comfortable sharing what the doctor told him?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I am. I'm supposed to not participate in any activity that would cause any undue stress to myself, as being diagnosed with having acute mental health flare-ups, actively under therapy, and also on medication.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, was the information about Mr. Firth's medical condition shared with the House of Commons administration?
Mr. Firth.
Sorry, can you answer the question again, please?
Certainly, by all means.
The Honourable, one moment. Just want to make sure the time. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Was the information about Mr. Firth's medical condition shared with the House of Commons administration?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we shared it with the clerk.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this information is consistent with what was shared with all recognized parties yesterday individually by the law clerk and parliamentary counsel, that Mr. Firth's health is fragile and that a doctor has provided a note recommending that Mr. Firth does not participate in activities such as the questioning today for mental and physical health reasons. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, this information is consistent with what has been communicated yesterday by the Council and to all recognized party that Mr. Firth's health is fragile and that a doctor has provided a note recommending that Mr. Firth do not participate in activities such as the questioning today for mental and physical health reasons.
that Mr. Firth understands that he will have to answer questions and is prepared to do so once his health allows it. I want to be crystal clear. We believe that what happened with the ArriveCan app is unacceptable. We want to assure that all unanswered questions receive answers. That is an important principle of this House. That is why we supported the motion that brings Mr. Firth here today. We want to get to the bottom of this issue, and we want to ensure that committees are respected. Je tiens à être très clair.
I want to be very clear. We consider that what has happened with the ArriveCan app is unacceptable. We want to ensure that all the questions that have been unanswered will get an answer. This is an important principle of the House. That is why we supported the motion that has brought Mr. Firth here today. We want to get to the bottom of the situation, and we want to ensure that the committees are respected.
All recognized parties were individually informed of options to delay the questioning component of today's proceedings until Mr. Firth has been medically cleared to participate, and only the Conservatives refused. On this side of the House, we do not believe that it is appropriate to question Mr. Firth if he is not medically able to participate. We want this to be done in a way that respects the dignity of Parliament, and forcing someone against medical advice to do something that a doctor believes could harm their treatment and recovery is indeed beneath the dignity of this place. Nous voulons que cela se
We want this to happen with respect for dignity of Parliament, and forcing somebody against their doctor's advice to do something that, according to the doctor, could undermine their treatment and their healing is not worthy of this House.
demonstration of his character, and Canadians should pay careful attention.
Liberal corruption.
You're a bunch of heartless people.
It's not helpful. The Honourable Government House Leader.
I'll repeat the last sentence, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition is...
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr.
Sorry,
Chair,
Whip. The Honourable Member from South Surrey, White
Government
Rock.
House Leader is purposely causing disorder in this House. You just asked every person here to keep their conduct calm and within the dignity of the House for these extraordinary proceedings. He is saying things that were in a medical certificate that weren't there, because we had House leaders' discussion on this, and now he is using the opportunity to attack the official opposition. This is inappropriate, and it causes discord in this House, and it will cause disruption on a continuing basis. I ask you, Mr. Speaker, to please ask the government House Leader to conduct himself within the dignity and within the four squares of this extraordinary situation and not continue down this path.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
I thank the Honourable from South Surrey White Rock for raising this issue. I see that the Honourable Member from Regina Capel is also rising on his feet for point of order.
The same point of order. I think it's very important for you to understand how we got here. It is important to know that the witness was offered accommodations that have been granted, and that should there be further accommodations requested in terms of breaks or any type of need to consult with any professional, that we have signaled our absolute cooperation with that. These are very similar to the accommodations that the witness requested when it took months for him to respond to a committee invitation and further summons. These were the same accommodations that were provided when he finally did testify just recently, Mr. Speaker, and that is how we arrived at where we are today. I believe the dignity of this House, the ability for parliamentarians to do their jobs on behalf of taxpayers. On behalf of the taxpayers, many of whom lost every single cent they had during the lockdown, on behalf of the thousands of Canadians who were ordered into quarantine because of this app, it's essential we can...
I thank the member from Regina Capel. I thank the member from South Surrey White Rock for raising these points, and I would like to emphasize to all members the importance of us conducting ourselves. Canadians are clearly watching this historic event, and they would expect us to conduct ourselves befitting to the occasion. With that in mind, I invite the Honourable Government House Leader to finish his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, you have pointed out in your remarks earlier just how unprecedented this is. We supported this initiative, but we regret that it's come to this. And when we received the information that all parties were privy to, we made what I think is the responsible decision. And I think what you've just seen across the aisle is very confirmation of what I've been saying. Thank you very much.
I will take it then that we will move on to the next series of questions. The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Speaker, the ArriveCan was supposed to cost taxpayers $80,000, but the NDP Liberal government rewarded consultants and insiders who got rich on taxpayer dollars for an app that nobody wanted. The app erroneously forced more than 10,000 people under house arrest. It didn't work, and the Auditor General said it cost at least $60 million. ArriveCan is now under 13 federal investigations. 2 middlemen that do no IT work got rich in a corrupt system under this NDP Liberal government. Some, including the witness today, became multimillionaires. GC Strategies is a 2-person company, and they claim to find people who actually do the work by using LinkedIn. Nearly $20 million for ArriveCan is what they were paid, and roughly $2,500 per hour. They've been paid $100 million since forming GC Strategies just after this Liberal Prime Minister was elected. This is 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister. The Liberal government has been ordered to collect and recoup all funds paid to ArriveCan contractors and subcontractors that did no work on the ArriveCan app. My question, Speaker, has the government asked Mr. Firth to repay the money paid to GC Strategies on ArriveCan?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, they have not.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The procurement watchdog found numerous examples where GC Strategies, quote, had simply copied and pasted, end quote, information to prove the people GC Strategies found to do work on ArriveCan actually did it. Question, has the government asked GC Strategies to repay the money paid to GC Strategies for ArriveCan?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the numbers that were provided by the Ombudsman and from Public Works we found were inaccurate when we did our assessments. And secondly, we have not been asked to pay any money back.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
For how many contracts did GC Strategies copy and paste the exact same information?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we've never copied and pasted to win any contract.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Speaker, we know from committee testimony that Mr. Firth has admitted to doing exactly that. Today, media reports that Mr. Firth's property was raided by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. What crime are they investigating?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, that's correct. There was a search warrant, not an arrest warrant, for my property to obtain electronic goods surrounding the Butler allegations.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have also confirmed that GC Strategies and ArriveCan are under police investigation. Has the RCMP contacted Mr. Firth about those allegations related specifically to this Prime Minister's $60 million ArriveScam?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the RCMP has only reached out to us regarding Butler.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
In the search of Mr. Firth's home, did the RCMP take only electronic devices, or were there documents, cell phones, or any other information?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I wasn't at my premises when the search was being taken, so I cannot comment on that. I don't have that information.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Does Mr. Firth know if the property of his partner Darren Anthony has been searched by the RCMP?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, as of this morning, it had not.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
GC Strategies is two guys in a basement taking 30% commissions on multi-million-dollar contracts that they had no value to, but have endorsements from senior NDP Liberal government officials. On the endorsements, question, who was the Government of Canada Chief Information Officer who offered a quote?
Mr. Firth. Mr. Firth, you need time to consult with your counsel.
Yes, please.
The clock has stopped. Mr. Firth? The clock is still stopped. Could you please repeat the question of the honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes?
Speaker, GC Strategies is two guys in a basement taking 30% commissions on multi-million-dollar contracts that they had no value to, but have endorsements from senior NDP Liberal government officials. On
Point of order, the honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby is rising on his feet.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would appreciate the official opposition to approach this with some dignity. There is no NDP Liberal government. So I would expect that he would ask his questions in the appropriate form, please, through you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby. Indeed, that is the case. I will ask the honourable member if he could just reframe his question. It's a pertinent question as it is. The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island, Rideau Lakes.
This company has done no work on the multi-million-dollar contracts that they've been given by this Liberal government, supported by the NDP. On the endorsements on their website, who was the Government of Canada Chief Information Officer who provided an endorsement?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we gave that information over, and the name was Paul Girard.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Are all of the subcontractors that GC Strategies uses Canadian companies?
Mr. Firth, can you write it down?
Mr. Speaker, can I get clarification? Is that period or during the ArriveCan application?
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Subcontractors used on Government of Canada contracts.
Mr. Firth.
Every company that we represent and we work with for government contracts have valid Canadian security clearances.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Speaker, not an answer to the question that I asked. Does Mr. Firth have any knowledge or involvement in the reviews for the ArriveCan app on either the Apple Store or the Google Play Store being artificially amplified or paid for? Any knowledge at all?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I know those services exist, but I have no knowledge whether or not they were executed.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes.
Bring my time to the member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek, please.
The honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek has 4 minutes left.
Mr. Speaker, the Procurement Ombudsman found that 76% of resources named in bids on the ArriveCan contracts did no work and were switched out for other companies. He termed this the bait and switch, which is often used to sub out expensive subcontractors for cheaper ones, allowing the middlemen to take home more profit. Did Mr. Firth switch out any of his proposed resources on the ArriveCan application contracts?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we were part of the 24% that didn't. Every resource we proposed that were called up for task authorizations were given to the Government of Canada.
The honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, through you, has Mr. Firth ever engaged in bait and switch in any of his contracts with the Government of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we were asked to replace resources all the time, depending on if there's discrepancies with their experience, whether they're not working very well, or whether or not they need to move on to another project. They're contractors, so we replace resources frequently under the guidance of the client.
The honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek. But before she continues, I would like to let you know that we've discovered a little discrepancy in the time. She'll have an additional 30 seconds. So she has 3 minutes left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General found in her ArriveCan report that Mr. Firth sat at the table with public servants to draft the requirements for a contract worth $25 million that he was later awarded, and thereby was setting the price. Through you, what are the names of those public servants?
Mr. Firth.
Again, Mr. Speaker, that name was provided in the questions, and the government official's name was Diane Daly.
The honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That is in direct contradiction to the name that was submitted by Mr. Firth as a direct answer to this question from me at a committee last month. Why is the answer changing today?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the question posed to me was who did I speak with in May of 2022 prior to the contract award, and that was the procurement lady, which was the name I gave. But subsequently there was a question by Mr. Genius that was posed very similar to the honourable members, and that was who was I engaged with at CBSA when discussing suggestions, and that was Diane Daly.
The honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General also found that the CBSA advised KPMG, a multinational consulting firm, that they would be a subcontractor under his two-person middleman company. At committee, the Deputy Auditor General confirmed this would allow Mr. Firth and GC Strategies to take an additional 20% cut of the contract, despite not even doing the work to get them as a subcontractor. How many times have public servants provided him with subcontractors?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. It is common for once you have an existing contract in place for a client to engage your services to help bring on a subject matter expert that they wouldn't otherwise have access to, or typically, because contracting takes quite a long time, to actually bring them in if it's a time-sensitive deliverable.
The honourable member from Carleton-Trilla Eagle Creek has 30 seconds left.
Mr. Speaker, I will take that to mean that the public servants have provided him with subcontractors many times. Thank you.
Mr. Firth?
Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm not being elusive. I do not know the answer to that question.
Thank the honourable member. On va passer maintenant à l'honorable député.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to start these questions by touching once again upon some parts of my speech last week. Unfortunately, we are facing a historic situation caused by various problems. For example, the inconsistency of some information that we received, some information that was inconsistent within itself and also with information received from other sources. In addition, it has taken a great deal of time to receive written responses and requested documents. In some cases, the delay was up to 18 months. That said, I would add that the answers were received, although only after a great deal of delay and insistence. But nonetheless, they were in the end received, these answers. As I was saying, my questions today aim to understand processes, to understand gaps within the public service and its workings and procedures. I am not a court, and I have no intention of being one. I do not want this to turn into a court of popular opinion. I would invite people to focus on our role, finding the flaws in the system, in the organization, in processes, all of this in order to then fix the problems. I would add that, crucially, these flaws are nothing new. Many processes were implemented many years ago by the minister at the time, the Conservative minister, Ms. Ambrose. My first question. Mr. Speaker, I would like to know what skills and training were required in order to become a talent recruiter. I will ensure that Mr. Firth has heard the interpretation, and that will not take away from the honourable member's time.
Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I believe I understood the question. There's a series of things. There's building a network that can be just a few years of experience, working with clients, working with resources, understanding their skill sets, understanding their availability, understanding what their per diems are. It's a lot of things that have to be put into place to understand if somebody is perfect for a role. And again, are they the right experience? Are they the right skill set? And then on top of that as well, it's understanding how they respond to RFPs. We're a small shop. I mean, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody here. So myself and my business partner, we had to understand how to look for RFPs on buy and sell, how to respond to them, how to recruit for them, and then how to fulfill our obligations once the contracts be awarded. And then invoicing, timesheets, everything that goes from a 360 desk.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's hard to make a name for yourself within a giant government apparatus. So I'd like to know, Mr. Speaker, how the Witnesses Company became a benchmark for government talent recruitment.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the question. I'm not sure we're recognized as a benchmark. We were in a good position to respond and help with the ArriveCan application, with having resources already on the ground, already having them CBSA security cleared, which in itself takes a long time. But that's not typical. It was at that point we were I believe we beat out competition from 2 to 3 other firms. We also, you heard in testimony recently from AWS, Microsoft, and BDO that they didn't have the capacity to build the app. So although I understand it may look like we're the benchmark, we are not recognized as the benchmark with the federal government.
L'honorable député de Beauport.
The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, going back to well before ArriveCan, at the very beginning of GC Strategies, as a recognized business by the Government of Canada, how did things take place? How was the company able to make its mark?
Mr. Speaker, actually for the first 2 years GC Strategies was in business, we actually were building corporate requirements. We were trying to get onto supply arrangements like TBIPs and SBIPs and ProServe and all the mechanisms to go after business. I mean, granted, they were bluebirds, which is basically means you had no idea these things were hitting the street. And then shortly after winning the first 2 or 3, you then start getting corporate requirements. People start identifying you as being, good at one thing, good at all the other. And then at that point, you start building credibility and so forth.
L'honorable député de
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. And I would just state that she has 4 minutes and 45 seconds left. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So if I'm understanding correctly, the first few contracts received by the witness were received before fully understanding what would happen. If I remember correctly, these were in 2015. So despite the fact that the witness did not know entirely what the processes were, he still received contracts. I'd like to better understand this, Mr. Speaker.
Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, I understood what the process was for responding to RFPs, but for the first 2 years we were working in building our credibility through other companies, through like being asked from other subs for working with private sector, and at that point we've built the confidence in our network and understanding how many resources we had access to with specific skill sets that we felt comfortable going after the RFPs that were being put out by the federal government.
L'honorable député de
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to know if the witness thinks that government officials, especially with ArriveCan, abided by the rules, procedures and policies connected with their strategic privileged position within the state apparatus and the awarding of contracts from which he profited.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, can I please have that question repeated?
I'm going to stop the clock. Madame la députée de Beauport.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to know if the witness believes that government officials abided by the rules, procedures, and policies connected with their strategic privileged position within the government in awarding contracts to GC Strategies.
Mr. Speaker, again, without sounding elusive, and that's not why I'm here at all, I don't have the answer. I cannot comment on that. I'm not privy to every meeting that happens and every conversation that happens.
L'honorable député de Beauport.
The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, I understand that the witness does not understand the rules of the public service, but the officials with whom he was in contact, did any of them say that they could not do certain things because, as officials, this did not abide by the rules?
Mr. Speaker, no, they did not.
L'honorable député de Beauport.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General mentioned that members of GC Strategies drew up the criteria for contracts for the contract that they themselves won. I'd like to ask the witness if he believes that a business that draws up criteria should not withdraw from the call for tenders.
Mr. Speaker, previous testimony that came from Amazon and Microsoft last week, I believe it is common practice to offer suggestions, because typically clients aren't always best informed when it comes to writing RFPs or putting requirements together. Whether it's cloud computing for Amazon or Microsoft, it is common for government officials or technical resources to ask specific suggestions, understanding what skill sets and what technologies that they have to be privy with to be working on an application or working on projects.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou has 60 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From what I understand from these answers to my last questions, it seems to me that the public service at the present time feels obliged to find certain specialized consultants because it is not able to determine the criteria for its own needs. So there seems to be a lack of specialization, a lack of specialists, a lack of training. But I would add that it is not logical for a company that has worked at drawing up criteria should be able to bid for a contract with those criteria. This is something that government officials should carry out. And this is something that any businesses that want to bid for a contract should avoid. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou for her questions.
To the Honourable Member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley, who has 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too am struck by the historic nature of this moment and keenly aware of our responsibility, a sacred responsibility, to not only seek answers on behalf of Canadians, but to ensure that we are not doing undue harm to the individual who's here before us, and that we're conducting ourselves in a way that upholds the integrity, the dignity, and the credibility of this place that lies at the heart of our democracy. And I'll certainly try, Mr. Speaker, to uphold those values in my questioning. We're here because of the serious allegations and revelations surrounding the procurement and the execution of the ArriveCan app, a piece of technology that incorrectly required thousands of Canadians to quarantine, a piece of technology that cost some $60 million, and a piece of technology that was procured in a way that both the Auditor General and the Procurement Ombudsman have found was highly irregular and likely connected to misconduct on the part of the government officials who were responsible. There are two main questions of substance that I believe we were seeking answers to today. The first dealt with Mr. Firth's misleading of the committee when it came to the question of whether he had met with government officials outside of work. And the first time that that question was raised at committee, Mr. Firth replied in the negative, that he had not met with officials outside of work, and then later provided documentation that showed he had met with 3 officials at some half a dozen Ottawa restaurants and breweries. My first question, Mr. Speaker, through to Mr. Firth, is why he chose to mislead the committee in the first instance.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm fully endorsing the abolishment and understanding that there was questions that may have not been answered correctly, and understanding that some of them may have been obtuse, and that's why I'm here today, and we'll be answering all questions like I have been since the last 45 minutes, honestly and to the best of my knowledge.
The Honourable Member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, the question as originally asked at committee was a simple yes or no question. Had the individual met with government officials outside of work? And Mr. Firth replied that no, he had not. My question, which was not provided with an answer, was why he chose in that moment to mislead the committee.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, at that time, I didn't know how many, so rather than give a fake answer, I didn't know exactly how many people I'd met with. I've been doing this for 16 years.
Mr. Speaker, the question...
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Speaker, the question was not how many government officials or how many times. The question was a yes or no question. Had Mr. Firth met with government officials outside of work? Why did he refuse to answer that question? Why did he answer that question? Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Why did he mislead the committee by answering that question in the negative? Why?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, at that time, I thought I did answer it correctly.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
I have a very difficult time accepting that answer and believing that answer to be the truth. The other question of substance that I believe we were here to seek an answer to is which government official, Mr. Firth, discussed the criteria for a contract that he was eventually awarded. And I believe he's provided that name as being Diane Daly. Can Mr. Firth confirm that that is indeed the government official with whom he discussed the contract criteria?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, I think for Canadians watching, this is really the most troubling of the allegations, that Mr. Firth, on behalf of his company, was involved in setting the rules and the criteria for a contract, a multi-million-dollar contract, that strangely enough, his firm was eventually awarded. To most Canadians, this would look like, and I won't exaggerate, it would look like a rigged system that is designed to benefit Ottawa insiders and make it more difficult for entrepreneurs and small businesses in this country to do work for the government. Does Mr. Firth not agree?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the RFP, the contract that's in question, had over 220 requirements involved in there. We offered up 3 suggestions, what still PSPC deemed 40 qualified vendors could respond to, and of which 10 showed interest. So I don't see that as overly restrictive.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, both the Auditor General and the Procurement Ombudsman found that the criteria for that contract were set in such a restrictive way that only GC Strategies could have been selected as the successful bidder. Does Mr. Firth not agree that that process is profoundly unfair?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I kind of find the Ombudsman's comments to be somewhat subjective after the fact. I cannot comment for why the other 39 people did not respond. People are busy, they're sometimes under the bandwidth, and also for the Auditor General to understand that we would be the only people that could respond to this. There's 635 other vendors out there with corporate requirements, and there's probably 10,000, 12,000 resources out there with technical requirements. Unless they're familiar with all of those, it's hard again to assume that we were the only people qualified to win this.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are deeply troubled by the allegations and revelations surrounding the ArriveCan app. Could Mr. Firth, in his own words, describe what those concerns are precisely?
Mr. Firth.
Actually, no, I don't think I can, Mr. Speaker. Being honest, I don't know the allegations and accusations around the ArriveCan app. We used the first 3 national security exemption contracts. Actually, only 2 of them, the first and the third, was used to build the ArriveCan application. So, again, not being disrespectful, either I don't understand the question, but I think I'm answering you honestly.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
At committee, Mr. Speaker, when Mr. Firth was asked about which government official he discussed contract criteria with, he refused to answer, citing the fact that the RCMP were now involved at some level in looking into the circumstances surrounding the ArriveCan app. And yet, the rules of Parliament and the laws of Canada do not accept that as a valid reason to refuse to answer a question of Parliament. Does Mr. Firth accept the fact that the rules required him at the time to provide a full answer to our questions at committee?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, as a result of my abolishment and understanding that I do now.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, in an internal investigation report by the company Bottler AI, there's a characterization of communication with Mr. Firth in which he is discussing the exorbitant commissions charged by his company for the work done by subcontractors. And in those communications, he is alleged to have said that it, quote, sucks for Canada, unquote. Does Mr. Firth recall making those comments?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I've not seen any of that content. I cannot recall saying that at all.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, given that Mr. Firth is now brought before the bar of Parliament for only the second time in our country's history, given the grave concerns of Canadians, I wonder if there's anything that he would have done differently in his initial committee appearances to avoid the situation he now finds himself in.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, absolutely. I would have answered the questions more concisely, taken more time in giving the answers, and putting all written information back to the committee faster.
A very brief question to the honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Speaker, earlier Mr. Firth said that no one has asked him to pay back the commission that he earned. I would ask that given that the Auditor General found the government overpaid for the ArriveCan app, given that the app itself didn't work and sent thousands to quarantine incorrectly, given that the Auditor General has called the record keeping around those contracts some of the worst that she has ever seen, given that 76% of the subcontractors did zero or little work, and given that GC Strategies bills itself as a recruitment firm but doesn't recruit, given all of that and the fact that Mr. Firth took $2.5 million in commission for very little work, will he give that money back?
Mr. Firth, a very brief answer, please.
Mr. Speaker, we were the 24%, we were not the 76%, and we did recruit over 50 people to work on the ArriveCan application, over 100 people in totality at CBSA, and the answer is we did as we were told. We invoiced monthly. At any time we could have been stopped. We were given $20 million and then walked away and built an app. This was not our app. We were paid to recruit and find resources who built the app within 20 days and did subsequent new releases for 18 months. And on time and on budget.
This concludes the first round of questioning. Mr. Firth, would you like a pause before the House proceeds to the next round?
Mr. Speaker, yes, please.
La séance est suspendue.
The sitting is suspended until the call of the chair.
Alors, la séance.
The sitting will now resume.
Before we continue with our business, there is some other business that I have to get done. It is my duty pursuant to Standing Order 38 to inform the House that questions to be raised tonight at the time of adjournment are as follows. Conformément à la
Pursuant to Standing Order 38, it is my duty to inform the House that the questions to be raised tonight at the time of adjournment are as follows.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Rocky Ridge, the Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre, and the Honourable Member for Cypress Hills Grasslands. The House will now proceed to the second round of questions. La Chambre procédera maintenant.
The House will now proceed to the second round of questions. Each recognized party will have 10 minutes.
We'll have 10 minutes. I wish to remind honourable members that all questions are to be addressed through the chair. J'aimerais rappeler aux honorables.
I wish to remind honourable members that all questions are to be addressed through the chair.
L'honorable leader.
The Honourable Leader of the Government. We will move on to the Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, I would like to know first from the witness, what are the Butler allegations that led to the search of the residence by the RCMP?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of the allegations. There were 6 points on the search warrant, and I think they weren't very specific to any specific allegation. But from previous testimonies, I'm understanding that it was fraudulent billing and resume fraud.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable.
Monsieur le Président, le témoin Firth est ici à la suite du scandale libéral de l'application ArriveCan du Premier ministre, une application qui devait coûter 80 000 $, qui en a coûté 60 millions. Est-ce que le gouvernement libéral, qui a versé des dizaines de millions de dollars pour du travail qui n'a pas été fait, vous a contacté?
Pay. The Honourable Member for is rising on a point of order. There is no interpretation into English.
The member's question.
May I ask colleagues, was there English translation for the first question? But not for the second. All right.
Could anyone tell me whether the system is working now? I would ask the member for Mégantic-l'Érable to begin his second question again. Thank you. Witness Firth is here following the Liberal Prime Minister's ArriveCan scandal, an app that was supposed to cost $80,000. It ended up costing $60 million. Did the Liberal government, which was cheated out of tens of millions of dollars for work that wasn't done, ask you to repay it or contact you about how to do it?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I was not contacted.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Witness Firth either refused to answer questions or lied to the parliamentary committee after we learned that the Prime Minister's government made him a multimillionaire at the expense of taxpayers. Can the witness confirm that he never lied in the parliamentary committee?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, acknowledging the fact that I'm being admonished, right, making history right now, I think I've acknowledged the fact I made mistakes in previous committees.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, can Mr. Firth tell us when he lied exactly?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have the exact information. Again, I'm not being elusive. I just can't allude to which questions and what time and which month.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, I understand that the witness lied on a number of occasions in committee, and that is why we are here today to try to discover the truth. Can Mr. Firth confirm that he avoided naming his sources within the Liberal government to protect his business model, which results from the Liberal government's lax approach to procurement?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I didn't.
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Can Mr. Firth confirm that the 3 quotes on the GC Strategies website were anonymous at the request of the authors of those quotes?
Mr. Firth.
I can confirm that was requested.
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Did these individuals derive any benefit from allowing GC Strategies to use their comments anonymously?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, they did not.
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. I apologize for the delay, but my microphone was not turned on, so I didn't hear the answer. The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, I'll be sharing my time with the member for Calgary-Midnapore.
From Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Firth just admitted that the RCMP raided his house relative to Bottler AI. When Mr. Firth introduced Bottler AI to his consultant colleague, Mr. Von Brennan, he had them email Mr. Jeremy Broadhurst, the former Chief of Staff for the Minister of Finance and the current Liberal campaign chair. Did Mr. Brennan regularly set up Mr. Firth's contacts with elected officials, ministers, and their chiefs of staff?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, that's news to me. I've never engaged Vaughan Brennan to get any meetings with senior government officials.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Firth aware that Mr. Brennan's wife works for Procurement Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I was as of the 3rd testimony when that was brought to light, but until then I was not aware of it.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
What benefits did Mr. Von Brennan provide Mr. Firth for that furthered their professional relationship?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, Vaughan Brennan never provided anything outside of just the work we would give him on a per diem time and material basis for a government department.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Firth submitted that he was meeting with government officials outside of government offices. Where did Mr. Firth meet Paul Girard, former CIO of TBS?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I've met Paul Girard at Starbucks on 99 Metcalfe.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Did Mr. Firth discuss at this meeting?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, with Mr. Girard's position, and I had 2 contracts within his directorate, it was just understanding if how the contracts were going, thanking the resources were performing well, understanding if there are any issues, and I think just general Chief Information Officer duties.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Where did Mr. Firth meet Monsieur Philippe Johnston, former CIO at NRC?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, could Baton Rouge, that was underneath where his department was, or it could have been a coffee shop?
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
What did Mr. Firth discuss at this meeting?
Mr. Firth.
So, Mr. Speaker, at that time is very similar to Mr. Girard. We had contracts within Mr. Johnson's department, and I think it was just a health check on the contracts, making sure that my resources were performing. If they weren't, then they'd let me know this and we'd replace them.
30 seconds left to the honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Firth has made connections and met with public servants for over a decade, wining and dining them for contracts. Officials became comfortable with the system. Officials allowed Mr. Firth to charge millions because they weren't willing to follow the rules and used Mr. Firth as their way easily out of accountability. Through you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Firth, who are you protecting in this corrupt system?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not protecting anybody. I'm just going about my business like an IT staffing firm does.
The honourable member from Brantford-Brant.
Mr. Speaker, all my questions will be through you. Did Mr. Firth review the content of the search warrant executed on his house yesterday?
Mr. Firth.
I skimmed through the 6 pages, yes.
The honourable member from Brantford-Brant.
Did the search warrant specify forgery pursuant to 366 of the Criminal Code and fraud pursuant to Section 380 of the Criminal Code of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I skimmed through, and to answer honestly, I cannot give that answer accurately.
The honourable member from Brantford-Brant.
Mr. Firth admitted that he altered 2 resumes, replacing a 2-month internship with 51 months of professional experience. On another occasion, he inflated 7 years of experience to 12. He claimed that this was a mistake. He didn't have consent to manipulate the resumes. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we've mentioned this previously in previous testimonies, but we encourage the RCMP to do investigation into the Butler allegations, whether it's fraud over 5,000, because we believe it's going to exonerate us.
The honourable member from Brantford-Brant.
He clearly didn't answer the question. I'll move on. How many other times has Mr. Firth altered materials and resumes to the government since 2015?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker,